I've chosen Jean-Luc Godard's Weekend because it's a film I saw when I was about 20 at the Old Arts Lab in Drury Lane, and I went in to see this film, and I'd never, ever seen a film like it in my life before. I loved the film, but it was a kind of what came with it. It was a sort of, it's a very overworked word, but it was cool. It was a very cool film, and I'm still thinking about what it means, actually, from time to time when I see clips from it or I see it again. Well, in the clip I've chosen a couple. It's a married woman and her lover, and they're bourgeois French attractive couple, meeting in a sort of darkened room. And she's talking to him about a sexual encounter that she had a couple of days before. And he's completely bored and seemingly not that interested, but keeps saying, well, go on, what happened next? And this text becomes more and more erotic in its kind of language. But her delivery remains cool and completely unsexual.
J'étais fatiguée, j'avais très froid. Maintenant, je m'aperçois que j'étais pas ivre du tout. Je voulais qu'il me baise, c'est tout. N'importe où, finalement. Même dans l'ascenseur.
To me, that's kind of central to what's fascinating about the scene, because it's dealing with something that fascinates me and, in truth, probably everybody in the world, which is sex. And cinema has always kind of had a fascination with sex and how to deal with it. And I think Godard said that the two things you couldn't really do properly on screen were to literally make love or to literally kill someone. And the impersonation of those two acts was somehow not up to much. So we had to come up with different ways of dealing with the subject, which in this period of his filmmaking, he did quite graphically.
Bien, Paul s'est mis à poil aussi. Il me faisait admirer son sexe. Il a demandé à Monique de baisser mon slip.
What is brilliant about this clip, and it's actually, we don't see the whole clip because we haven't got time, it's about an 8-minute scene, and there are some tricks in it. For a start off, the feeling is that it's in one take, but actually it probably isn't, because Godard uses, in Weekend in general, he uses these funny little cutaways to red titles or blue titles, which as a filmmaker I know is a very good way of getting out of trouble when you've committed yourself to one take and you're not going to shoot coverage. And you've got 3 takes, and the first part of take 1 is brilliant and the second part of take 3 is brilliant. If you cut away to some blue letters, you don't feel like you've sort of betrayed your original intent, which is to have the feeling of one take. There's the obvious point of the scene, which is this woman talking about this erotic encounter she had with, it was a threesome, her and another woman and a man. And at a certain point, quite early on in the scene, to me the most riveting thing happens, which is that the score suddenly comes bursting in on the soundtrack and obliterates what she's saying. I think there's probably a much richer experience for an English audience because we have the benefit of a subtext on the screen being, you know, written for us, so we can read it like a book. And I assume that a French audience are denied the text at that point because they wouldn't be looking at subtitles. And Godard seems deliberately to say, this is getting a bit boring, so let's just bring some music in over this. And this score has a kind of really threatening, ominous sort of overtone to it and comes in and out through the whole text. And the minute he's introduced it, and my background is music and sound, and my obsessions tend to be sound, it completely alters the tone of what is a sort of sexually frivolous kind of feeling to the scene. And you suddenly have the feeling that something else altogether is at stake here and is the issue. And it's brilliant. He's grabbed your attention, and you can never, even after 26 years, can't really say why. The camera starts to move in, and it comes into a close-up on him at some point, and then backs off and finds her. Sometimes the music coincides with this camera move, sometimes it doesn't. I've often described this scene to other people and to actors and said, you know, look at this film, and in particular this scene, it's really brilliant. And I would describe it, and I described her as wearing, I said she's a very beautiful bourgeois French sexy girl. She's wearing black underwear, and she's sitting amongst the crockery on the sort of sink unit, the washing up sort of area, and she's talking about this whole sort of erotic incident that happened in the kitchen. So when I look at the film, I realize that it's not a kitchen. She's nowhere near the sink. She's actually probably sitting on a table, but you never quite see the bottom of her bum, so you can't, and the camera's parallel to whatever she's sitting on, so you never see what she's sitting on. And it was merely my sort of, my memory and my pleasure in her story that I'd kind of completely blended with the reality, so-called reality of the visual stuff in the scene. And there is one other point which I discovered yesterday, which is like a little detective thing, just a filmmaker's kind of obsession, which is that there's a script published by Lorimer, which I've had for years, and it refers to the camera as tracking in and tracking out of the two subjects. And I thought to myself, that can't be right, because Raoul Coutard, you know, they were really into zoom lenses and handheld stuff and kind of documentary feel. And it feels like a zoom to me. But when I was listening to it yesterday and I turned the soundtrack up very, very high, and you can do this when you all watch it, you can actually hear the creaking of the camera on the dolly as it moves over the boards, and it's actually very loud.
Alors, et puis?
Alors, elle nous a ouvert la porte.
As a filmmaker, when you hear that, you think, oh my God, I'm going to have to fix that in post-production. But Godard being Godard, A, he didn't fix it, and B, more or less drowned it by the music.
Et c'est tout?
Ben, au bout d'un moment, Paul a demandé à Monique de se mettre à ma place.
Parce que vous, elle, je...
Oui. Elle qui m'embrassait le sexe et moi avec la main qui était Paul, la deuxième par derrière.
C'est tout.
Après, on s'est branlé tous les deux en regardant. Et puis, Paul, tout à coup, s'est mis à crier « À la cuisine, les minettes, à la cuisine, les minettes ».
La cuisine, pourquoi?
Je te le dire. Il y avait sur le frigidaire une assiette de lait pour le chat. C'est au-dessus du frigidaire. Les assiettes, c'est fait pour s'asseoir, a dit Monique. Vous pariez que je m'assois dans l'assiette? Je parie que tu n'oses pas, dit Paul. Alors, Monique a grimpé dans l'évier pour être à la hauteur du frigidaire et elle s'est accroupie pour tremper son derrière dans l'assiette. Et sans nous quitter des yeux, elle nous a ordonné de nous branler tous les deux.
C'est tout.
Paul a dit stop, stop, et il m'a dit de grimper dans l'évier aussi. Il s'est agenouillé devant Monique, et puis il a pris un œuf dans le frigidaire, et pendant que j'embrassais le sexe de Monique, qui trempait toujours dans le lait, Paul a mis l'œuf entre mes fesses en donnant jouer, jusqu'à ce que l'œuf éclate et déboule entre mes jambes.
C'est vrai ou c'est un cauchemar? Je t'adore, Corinne. Viens m'exciter.